Okay, let's talk about the Jeffrey Epstein story. It's a name we all know, right? But what if I told you the real story isn't just about one monstrous man? What if it's about something much, much bigger? We're diving into a story of power, blackmail, and a system that seems built to protect the very people who should be held accountable. And this quote, this one really hits the nail on the head. It forces you to look at everything differently. See, this was never just about one person's private scandals. No, this was a power scandal. And that's a whole different beast. We're talking about how power itself was used as a weapon to enable horrific abuse, to hide the truth, and to make sure the most influential people in the world, well, that they could get away with anything. So what's the real difference here? Well, think about it like this. A sex scandal is like a lightning strike. It hits one person, causes a lot of personal shame, and maybe their career is over. But a power scandal? That's like an earthquake. It doesn't just shake one person, it reveals the cracks in the entire foundation. It exposes the whole rotten system, the hidden rules, the corruption that lets the powerful play by a completely different set of rules. You've probably seen some of the photos that have come out, right? And it's easy to just think of them as, well, embarrassing moments for famous people. But the argument here is that there's so much more than that. This wasn't just about catching someone in a bad moment. This was evidence. Evidence of a calculated, systematic operation designed for one thing: blackmail. To collect what they call compromising material that could be used to control some of the most powerful people on the planet. Okay, so to really get our heads around this whole twisted web, we have to start with the man who spun it, the spider at the very center of it all, Jeffrey Epstein. Now, everyone knew Epstein as this super wealthy financier, right? But that was just the cover story. His real business, it was influence. He wasn't just brokering stocks, he was brokering secrets. Think about that. His actual currency wasn't dollars, it was information. It was access. He built an entire empire not on what people owned, but on what they desperately wanted to keep hidden. And look at where he operated. We're talking about a massive mansion in New York, a sprawling estate in Palm Beach, and of course, the one everyone's heard of, that private 78-acre island in the U.S. Virgin Islands. But here's the key thing to understand. These weren't just fancy houses. Oh no, these were custom-built headquarters for his criminal enterprise, fortified, isolated, and designed to be way, way off the grid, far from any prying eyes. So how did he actually do it? How did this whole machine operate? Let's get into the nuts and bolts of it. It was a horrifyingly simple and effective four-step trap. It started with the lure, targeting young, vulnerable girls with promises of money, jobs, a better life. Then came the abuse, systematic and repeated, happening at his private properties. After that, control. He used fear, pressure, anything he could to make sure they stayed silent. And then, in maybe the most twisted part of it all, he'd force the victims to recruit new girls, turning them into a part of the very system that destroyed them. And there were a few key pieces that made this whole dark machine run. You had the island, Little St. James, which was the perfect secluded spot for the absolute worst to happen. You had his private jet, infamously nicknamed the Lolita Express, which could fly powerful people and victims around the world with no questions asked. And then you had Ghislaine Maxwell. She was the engine. Not just a sidekick, she was the main recruiter, the trainer, the enforcer. She was the one who allegedly kept the whole horrifying operation running day in and day out. Okay, and we have to pause here for a second because this is incredibly important. We're about to talk about some very big names. But please remember, just because someone was associated with Epstein, it does not automatically mean they're guilty of a crime. The reason these names are important is because they show you just how vast this network was, how high up it went, and how deep its roots were in the most powerful circles on Earth. And I mean, the reach is just staggering. We're talking about documented connections, from flight logs, photos, calendars, to people like former US President Bill Clinton, Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates, even British royalty like Prince Andrew. And the list goes on and on with other politicians, billionaires, you name it. And again, this isn't about pointing fingers and saying guilty. It's about understanding that this wasn't some back alley operation. This network reached right into the very heart of global power. All of which leads to the million-dollar question, right? If this thing was so big and so connected, how on earth did it go on for so long? And that's when you have to start looking at the justice system itself. Just look at this timeline. It's just incredible. The first complaint comes in all the way back in 2005. Dozens of victims eventually come forward. And what happens? In 2008, he gets this sweetheart deal that is just beyond belief. 13 months with work release privileges every day for crimes that destroy lives. It then takes another 10 years before he's finally arrested on serious federal charges in 2019. And then, a little over a month later, he's found dead in his cell. Now, the official story is that he took his own life. But given who this man was, and more importantly, the secrets he held, that official story immediately raised a huge, dark question mark that's still hanging over this whole thing. And you can see why people are so suspicious when you look at the details. The two guards who were supposed to be watching him reportedly fell asleep. The surveillance cameras that should have caught everything mysteriously malfunctioned. Even the medical report itself was questioned by experts. It all just seems too convenient, right? The one man with all the dirt on the world's most powerful people dies just in the nick of time. This quote really says it all, doesn't it? Epstein's death made one thing clear. Some people are more dangerous alive. Think about that. As long as he was breathing, he was a threat to a lot of very powerful people. His death, however it happened, slammed the door shut on what he might have said. So, where are we now? Epstein's gone, yeah, but this mystery, it is far from over. In fact, you could say it's only just beginning. This chart really paints a clear picture of the problem. You've got Epstein, deceased. You've got Ghislaine Maxwell, sentenced. But then you have this huge, glaring gap, the powerful clients, the people who allegedly created the demand for this whole network. And for the most part, they've faced absolutely no consequences. We keep hearing about the Epstein Files being released, right? Documents are slowly trickling out. But if you talk to victims, to activists, they'll tell you this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's this feeling, this strong belief that the real story, the most explosive names and details are still buried deep, being protected by the system. Ghislaine Maxwell is in prison for 20 years, and for the victims, that is a very real piece of justice. But for many people looking at the bigger picture, she's just one person, one link in a very long, very powerful chain. And her conviction just makes the biggest question even louder. Who else was involved? And will we ever see them face a judge? And we have to remember, this whole thing wasn't just an American scandal, not by a long shot. This was a global operation. We've seen names and connections pop up from the UK, from France, from all over the world. It really was an international web of power and abuse. So in the end, the biggest question here isn't, what did Jeffrey Epstein do? We know what he did. The real question is about us. It's about our system. When it comes down to a fight between the truth and powerful people who want to hide it, who wins? Are we ever going to get the whole unvarnished story? Or are we just going to see another example